get my 6. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Homesteading Off the Grid, the most popular homesteading channel on the entire internet that has absolutely nothing to do with homesteading. All right, so I'm out here where field meets forest, at elevated land, where land meets sky, just at dusk, to tell a creepy haunted story. And it's for a reason, because I want you to watch in the background. We've had some very odd things going on in our county this spring, and I think I've been proven right. I kept my mouth shut about it because there was a lot of people in danger, a lot of animals in danger, and you'll notice the angle's different. I'm usually like right here, but I'm really trying to give you the entire view of the skyline back here. So what was going on is that we were having bear attacks on livestock for the last couple of months, but it wasn't adding up. There were people who were having sheep and goats taken from steel pens, bars bent, dogs that were chained up, ripped off of the chains and eaten. Okay, so the people in the know were saying that it was black bears, and they were saying that it was because since we had a very mild winter and it got warm quicker this year than usual, the bears came out of hibernation sooner than they usually do, and the food that is supposed to be ready for them when they come out of hibernation wasn't ready yet because everything was a month behind, so they were going after livestock. I never bought that story from the first time I heard it, because bears are scavengers primarily, and they would first go after trash bins, trash cans, dumpsters. You see this a lot in the summertime during droughts. They'll come down into the communities and raid trash cans, bins. When the water's low at the higher elevations, they come down looking for water. They never go after livestock first. So I heard a tree knock. We are not alone. And those of you who have been following this channel for any period of time knows that I have a very distinct research method. It's basically, I come out here, I blabber, I talk, I tell stories, I ignore the background, and they just creep in on us. So watch for this. So earlier this week, they dispatched, is the word I have to use on social media, a very large black bear. It was 8 feet in length, and it was close to 400 pounds. And they said that its skin was rancid because so many people had shot it with salt shot or whatever when it was coming around their place to, what they thought, get their livestock. So everybody thought, all right, problem solved. We got it. We don't have to worry about this again. Okay, that was about 4 or 5 days ago. Last night, another steel enclosure was bent open and a goat taken with no trace left. Okay, so they got the 400-pound, 8 feet tall black bear that they were blaming this on, yet it happened again. So what's that tell you? All right, so with no further ado, as my beautiful bride dearly would say, aka Giggly Girl, I'm going to read you a story from True Hauntings, Volume 2. Personal stories of real experiences with the paranormal, supernatural, cryptids, aliens, and UFOs. You can get these on Amazon and print or Kindle. We do have some print copies left available with autographs on our Etsy store. The links to both of those places are in the description box below. This is a pretty creepy story, and the submitter of this story, I believe she asked to be anonymous. Did she sign it with her name? Well, AS, her initials, okay? This one's kind of tough to listen to. It is creepy. I couldn't imagine going through this. This woman is not a victim. She's a victor. Now, she was a victim, but she maintained the attitude of a victor, and she's done quite well for herself. Now, as you listen to the story, watch the background, because we've got something around here that's bending steel and taking livestock and leaving no trace. Okay? This is a story called, Did the Demons Make Him Do It? Hi, Kevin. I have been an occasional viewer of your YouTube channel for a few years now. I'm going to be honest with you. My rational mind brought me to your channel to figure out how to restring a weed eater, but my curious mind brings me back once a month or so to see what you're up to, and admittedly, if I can see anything strange and unexplainable in the background of your videos. That's what we were just talking about. I pride myself on being very rational and using reason rather than emotion to make my way through this world. However, I had a really strange experience. Actually, it was a series of strange experiences when I was a preteen that caused me to leave room for debate open in my mind in regard to the unexplainable. This is the reason for my email. You have my permission to read my story on your channel or to use it in any publication you choose. Just please do not use my name. I am a trusted professional in my community, and I work in a position that burdens me with the responsibility of affecting a lot of people's futures. And if it were known that I still had doubt in my mind that what I experienced approximately 30 years ago now was anything other than a prank being played on me by an annoying stepbrother, it could negatively affect, if not outright, end my career. My parents got divorced when I was 12 years old. They should have never been married. I always had reason to believe the only reason they got married is because they got pregnant with me. And finally, when I almost got married at too young of an age myself, my mother finally confided this fact in me. She did so not to guilt trip me, obviously, as she would have informed me of this fact much earlier in life, had guilt tripping been her objective, but to convince me not to make what she viewed as a huge mistake at the time. Looking back, I can see that she was right. I was madly in love with my first love, but that's all there was to it. Today, that gentleman, though as nice as he ever was, hasn't turned out to be much of a keeper, and I could not imagine the burden I would bear on a daily basis supporting myself, any children I may have had with him, and him, as I don't believe the man has ever gotten and kept a job for 6 months straight in his adult life. Not to assassinate his character, and let me point out he is super nice, always has been, he's just your typical beta male deadbeat. There's a lot of those in society, isn't there? Today, I am happily married to a hard-working man who is the father of our 3 children, and like myself, he works hard daily to take care of our family. He works in law enforcement. I am a victim advocate, and it is actually through our lines of work where we met. Though long-winded, this is all relevant. We like long-winded around here. You see, after my parents' divorce, my mother acted in haste and ended up getting involved with a ne'er-do-weller pretty quickly after she moved me, my little brother, and herself out of our father's house. The man was okay, but he wouldn't work. But the biggest problem was not the fact that my mother had to support our unit for the nearly 1 year they were together, but the fact that he had a 17-year-old son who was a total piece of shit. Please excuse my language, but I cannot sugarcoat it in regard to this guy. When I was 12 years old, he took my virginity, and it was not consensual. I honestly believe that it was my mother's relationship with that deadbeat and my unwilling relationship with his piece of shit son that determined my future career path for me. Also, it's why for a time I had such a problem picking good men over deadbeats. It was learned behavior, and I had to unlearn it. Anyway, when my mother and my brother and myself were stuck with these 2 poor excuses for males, we lived in an old rental house that bordered an old cemetery. The interesting thing about the cemetery was that it wasn't your typical churchyard burial site. It was a cemetery for what had once been a state prison. Every grave on the site contained the body of what had been a convicted felon. Shortly after we moved into that house, the house of horrors as I always remember it, we would notice that things would go missing. Nothing important that we used regularly, but items that we would use every few days or so, like a can opener or an iron, once it was a stapler, so in a matter of time we would notice. When this started, we assumed some of these things had gotten lost in the move, but one day, which happened to be the first time that my little brother and I walked through the cemetery, we found our lost can opener on top of one of the old graves. I say old because the prison had been closed for more than a century. The building no longer remained, though you could see part of the old stone foundation, and you could only read a few of the tombstones. Most of the engraving on most of the stones had been worn away with time and weather, and no one, it seemed, came to visit any of the graves. It looked like a scene straight out of a horror movie. To speed things up, what I'll say is that in time and after the abuse of my stepbrother began, I started to believe it was him who was taking things out of our house and leaving them on the graves. I viewed it as if he was playing a trick or a sick prank, and I would later, while training for my profession, learn all about gaslighting, where people with sociopathic or psychopathic tendencies will attempt to create false worlds in their victims to make them look crazy and think that they are. It makes them easier to manipulate, and it gives the abuser an out. If their victim appears crazy and unbelievable, well, then it's harder to believe that they are being abused. The reason I thought this had nothing to do with my suspicion that my stepbrother was gaslighting was not because at the time I had no idea what gaslighting was, but because I would often see him in the cemetery. He eventually got to the point when his abuse was at its height to where he would go to the cemetery every day and he would stay there for hours. And the strangest part of it was that he would hang out at primarily only one grave. Anyway, after my mother had been with his father for just under a year, they finally split up. To this day, my mother does not know about what that man's son did to me, and it's my goal to keep it from her. I know secrets aren't healthy, but my mother was never well mentally, and she's been slipping in her old age. I do not want to burden her with this. And like you, Kevin, I've spent my life turning lemons into lemonade. I know in my heart that I've helped young women who were in the same situation that I was in all those years ago obtain justice and peace. I've helped young women come to understand that there's much more to being a man than simply having the proper genitalia. And it doesn't matter how nice someone is. If they are unwilling to provide, they are not worthy of having, and no one who is abusive should ever be considered or tolerated. But here's the deal. This is the point of my story. Why I've emailed, and why I watch your channel on occasion, and why I have room left in my mind for entertaining that which cannot be explained. In my gut, I've always had my doubts about how those items got into that cemetery, and I'll point out they were always found on different graves, though there was one grave in particular where these things seemed to end up most. I guess I'll just come out and say it. I've always felt as if these items were being taken by the ghosts of the criminals, thieves. But what I'm going to tell you next is the real ringer, and it's why I'm requesting you keep me anonymous. I've told you what I do for a living, and I've told you what I've been through. If the information I'm about to relay to you now was ever made public knowledge and tied to me, I would without doubt and deservingly lose my job forevermore. My stepbrother looked me up about 2 years ago. I had not seen him in a quarter of a century. He messaged me on Facebook, and the minute I saw his face in his profile picture, my skin crawled. However, my curiosity got the best of me, and I read his message. As it turns out, the world has not been too kind to my stepbrother. He's been in and out of jails and prison, and about 2 years ago, he finally got sober after entering court-ordered rehab after getting a DUI. He was contacting me for something he had to do in regard to making amends as part of the 12-step program he was involved with. Somehow, I was able to remove my hurt little girl cap and put on my professional victim advocate hat, and I followed up with him. He'd given me his phone number, and I said I could call. He'd given me his phone number and said I could call, and that he was prepared to hear anything I had to say to him, but he would understand if I didn't want to contact him. It was as important for me to have closure with him as it was for him to have closure with me, but on my terms. I did not want to break down and tell him how he destroyed my life, because Kevin, he didn't. He made me stronger, and he made me a protector. I called him and I heard him out, and when he was finished and expecting the worst, all I said was, "I forgive you." This made him cry even more. This had not been my goal. It was merely my goal to let it all go, finally, and move on completely. Anyway, just before we got off the phone, and no, I have not and will not ever speak to him again, he made an effort towards small talk, which I did not reciprocate, but in his small talk he mentioned the cemetery, and he alluded to the idea that he'd been visiting the grave of a convicted rapist, and that he'd felt pulled there, and at times he'd felt possessed. But Kevin, hear me out on this. I know how to read the tone of people's voices due to my line of work, and what I will tell you is that he was not using the story he was giving me as an excuse for what he'd done to me. He, honest to God, believed every word of what he was saying, and part of me believes it too. Kevin, I have been holding this story in for the past 2 years since speaking to my former stepbrother. I want to thank you for providing a place for me to get it out. I have no clue what the hell was going on in that house by that old state prison cemetery all those years ago, and I'm not giving my former stepbrother an out. saying that I agree that I might have been, or that he, saying that I agree that he might have been possessed when he did what he did to me. Doing so would negate so much of the work that I have done to help so many others. What I'm saying is, well, I guess I don't really know what I'm saying, but I've said it. Take care. Your occasional viewer, AS, somewhere USA. So there you have it, folks. Haunting story, chilling story, and I will reserve comment or opinion. I'll leave that up to you. If you saw anything moving in the background, timestamp it. Again, I wanted to get out here, and I might do this more frequently. I don't think it was a bear. The story I shared with you at the beginning with the livestock going missing, the metal cages being broken into and livestock taken. I mean, they killed an 8 feet tall, 400-pound bear, and then just a few nights later, it happened again. Nothing like this has ever happened around here to my knowledge. These sorts of things, I mean, this is like rabid grizzly bear stories from out in the West or Pacific Northwest, not docile black bears in the mid-Atlantic and the East Coast. So I'll keep you updated. Hope you guys all have a great Friday night. Hope you enjoyed your Friday Night Fright. Again, these books, as well as all my books, are available on Amazon. Go to Amazon, type in Kevin Lake. Got a link in the description box below anyway. See you for more next time from here at Homesteading Off the Grid, the most popular homesteading channel on the internet that has nothing to do with homesteading. We appreciate those of you who visit our Homesteading Off the Grid Facebook page. My beautiful bride, Dearly, aka Giggly Girl, runs that page. She also has her own YouTube channel called Life with Dearly. Then, of course, if you want to hear a funny joke, we got plenty of them on here, but go over and see our Facebook page, Sick Twisted Humor, where we're closing in on 1 million viewers just on that page alone, 1 million followers. Appreciate all your support. Couldn't be here living life to the fullest like we do without each and every one of you. See you for more next time.